Welcome back to my channel, Star Booze.
After receiving a liver transplant, I was at a certain point. Prior to having the transplant, I was on the verge of passing away, and Shelley Fabares, the teen idol, had it everything. Johnny Angel, her popular song, outperformed the Beatles. Were on the charts. She starred alongside Elvis, appeared in 3 films. Then everything crashed. 1994 saw her fall from grace to own floor, shattering each of her ribs on the left. Physicians found a hidden. Her liver is being destroyed by sickness. The Soleil transplant was an option. For 22 months, she waited, uncertain as to whether she would survive or pass away. What transpired next was different. Everything. The birth date of Shelley Fabares was Santa Monica on January 19, 1944, California. Her dad was from New York. Later on, Orleans and her mother would be identified in 1988 as having Alzheimer's disease. However, the most significant impact on Shell's life weren't her parents. Her aunt was there. Nanette Faber, a television and Broadway star, had previously received 3 Tony Awards. Shelley won an Emmy before she even began. Observing her aunt's accomplishments provided Shelley an up-close look at what a life and show-how a business might appear. It appeared similar to a dream. It appeared to be feasible. By age, Shelley was modeling from the age of 3. Her mother recognized her ability and placed her in 1947, in front of a camera. Shell is older. Nanette, their sister, whom they referred to as Smokey, did modeling as well, but didn't continue it. Alternatively, Shell had anything unique. She appeared youthful for her age. Thus, she could keep pretending to be younger when other children were getting older and leaving the company. It provided more time for her to remain in the spotlight. Shelley made her at the age of 10. Premiere on television. In 1954, she appears in Loretta's Letter. That. The floodgates were opened by a single episode. Over the ensuing years, she appeared in Annie Oakley, Captain Midnight, Fury, as well as Colgate Theater. Then a significant chance. In the Producers' Showcase, Shelley was able to perform with Frank, Paul Newman, and Sinatra. For a child, that was unprecedented. Additionally, she had an appearance in A Wuthering Heights in real time, demonstrating her ability to manage serious substance. By 1958, she played a significant part, Disney's Zeynette, which aired in 15 episodes. Shelley wasn't your average and no longer a child actor. She was turning into a well-known name. Then came movie parts. She starred in The Girl Rush in 1955. It was not given credit, yet it led to her being on a filming location. The next year, she performed in Never Say Goodbye, Susie Parker. She was just 12 years old, but her name was eventually recognized. EDD. Credits. In the same year, she further appeared in Rock and the Bad Seed, Adorable Baby. Despite not having credit, she appeared in Jean, Just a Teenage Girl, Eagles. Once more, no credit. It continued. Little portions, frequently without acknowledgement, but each one taught her something. In 1958, she acquired parts in the Marguerite Morning Star as well as Summer Love. Things were getting worse. Steadily, but slowly. Next came the Take a Break. At the age of 14, Shelley secured Mary Stone's position on the Donna Reed Show. Everything altered as a result. She transitioned from part-time work to full-time celebrity status. The performance lasted 191. Shelley was present for the most of the episodes, among them. She was now a teenage idol. She was no longer merely acting. She was turning into a cultural icon. Her choice of it wasn't normal in the show. By the time, she had already performed when she tried out. Performed on national television with Frank Sinatra TV. It was unusual for a 14 years old. However, Shelley wasn't typical. She began working as soon as she was 3. Nanette, her aunt, was already renowned. She was well familiar with the industry. Endowed, despite her youth, she was prepared. In the background, something more profound was taking place. Donna Reed and Shelley formed a strong connection. It wasn't only, it felt almost like family, co-stars. Shelley subsequently claimed that Donna was like a second mom. Donna assisted her in developing not simply both personally and as an actress. One day, "Why don't you call me Donna?" asked Donna, rather than Miss Reed. Shelley was startled. She was raised at a Catholic school, was accustomed to formality. She needed to adjust to it, but it demonstrated how near they were now. Shelley Fabares had no intention of becoming a singer. However, the network experienced additional issues in late 1961, plans. They determined that her persona should perform live, and Shelley had no option but to comply. That's how she found themselves in a recording booth, terrified and in the company of famous musicians. She, beside Darlene Love and the Blossoms, were actual backing vocalists. Glenn Campbell, guitarist, and drummer Hal Carroll Kay, Blaine, and bassist played behind her. Legends back then. Shelley could hardly believe it. She acknowledged afterward, "I never could sing." Producers were also aware of it. They overflowed her, echoing vocals to hide her shortcomings, particularly in the recurring Johnny Angel. The song was broadcast on the program in the beginning of 1962. Nobody anticipated a lot. Of course, Shelley didn't, but a crazy event occurred. Only a few weeks subsequently, on April 7th, Johnny Angel struck top of the Billboard Hot 100 list. It remained for 15 weeks on the chart. It also reached the top of the Cashbox list and top in New Zealand and Canada. Even in the United Kingdom, where another vocalist had Fabares' version, has already been discussed. Got to number 41. More than 1 million copies sold. It was awarded a gold disc by someone who had no desire to sing. Her voice was described by critics as soft, pleasant, and encased in echo. Some even claimed that her version outperformed the experts because of its innocence and charm. It didn't sound audacious or assured, but perhaps that's why it was successful. The label hastily released a second single. May Johnny Loves Me came out in 1962. It was authored by Cynthia and Barry Mann and recounted the same story. Johnny's heart is ultimately won by a female. He didn't attain the same levels of success, Boutros to the 21st spot on the Billboard and on the adult contemporary number 7 diagram. It peaked at number 24 in Canada. Shelley's subsequent work, The Things We Completed last summer, reaching a number 46. These tracks all went on her. The same title appears on the second album. She rarely gave live performances, which was typical for TV celebrities to turn into vocalists. Lip-syncing dominated most appearances, in any case. The sound was maintained by her producers. Same, ethereal, gentle, and filled with echo. Teenagers were the target audience for the songs, and they were productive. Her songs didn't ask long time on the charts, however, it remained in fans' recollection of hearing it at the time. The albums followed. Shelley was through an agreement with Colpix's Records and have to make full-length albums available. Her was initially known as Shelley, and by her third album was released in 1963 and was titled Triangle of Teens. However, behind the scenes, she desired to leave. The timetable was harsh. Today, the majority of series shoot about 22 episodes, seasonally. Filming for The Donna Reed Show 39 annually for 5 years in a row, Shelley was working virtually constantly from 14 to 19 years old. She even needed to take classes to stay up to date with school. The grind was like that of a factory, and it left teenagers have limited freedom. Following 5 seasons later, Shelley took a risk. She went out. Going was the official explanation. To a university. However, the reality was much complex. She was forced into she had no desire for a music career. She was worn out. It was difficult for her to leave. She did make 7 more appearances. Succeeding seasons, however, the harm had been completed. Over the following 4 years, she was unable to find employment. Hollywood has moved on. Shelley waited. She had the correct belief. Time would pass once more, and ultimately it did. As Shelley Fabares arrived at the movie Girl Happy Inn, she had only been married for 17 years in 1965. Days. Producer Lou was her new husband, Adler, but Elvis Presley was the one who met her on the set. She felt anxious initially, but as soon as they met, that altered. According to Shell, it seemed like they'd knowing one another for all time. Not in a but something clicked romantically. Elvis was already familiar with her work. He had observed, he was aware of her from the Donna Reed Show, Johnny Angel, her popular song which had reached the top spot in 1962. He produced made her feel at ease right away. They had a clear chemistry. Even the team took note of him. Later, critics would say her innocent, lovely vibe worked, ideally beside Elvis. In Girl Happy, she portrayed the daughter, Valerie Frank, of a mobster from Chicago. Elvis was employed to keep an eye on her over spring break, Lauderdale. It was lighthearted and enjoyable film, but it went beyond that. It was the start of a genuine relationship between them. Not affection, but a bond that would endure 3 films in 3 years. They returned the next year, shot between them in Spin out April 7 and February 21, 1966. Cynthia Fox Hugh, portrayed by Shelley, is a pampered, wealthy girl whose father had a racing business. This time, Elvis's Mike McCoy, the character, had 3 lovers, interests, Diane McBain, Shelley, and Wall-E, Deborah. That might have made uncomfortable, but it didn't. Actually, the actor who had portrayed Shell's father, Carl Betts, was chosen to play her on the Donna Reed Show. In Spin Out, father once. More. That his familiar face reduced the tension on the set. The film was well liked by viewers. A portion of that Elvis Presley's chemistry with the women. Each of the 3 brought something distinct, and none of them diminished in proximity to him. Elvis received payment. The Donna Reed Show's former star, although it was delayed, acknowledgement seemed natural. The Young Artist Foundation even gave recognition to giving her an award for lifelong achievement. Her finest efforts were no longer in the past. However, as things stood in 1994, everything changed for the better. That, Shelley slipped through a hole in her head last year, house floor while remodeling. The descent broke all the ribs on her left side. She was 50 years old. The agony was excruciating. It took months to recover. However, she continued to working on the coach. Back then, everyone believed it to be a terrible accident. But there was worse to come. Following her doctors performed standard testing after the fall. Her levels of liver enzymes were dangerously elevated. Nobody was aware of the reason. Additional tests came after. More misunderstanding. Years passed before medical professionals ultimately determined her accompanied by autoimmune hepatitis. Her resistance to her liver was being attacked by the system. A while, medications were helpful, but the harm persisted. She was worn out all over. The moment. She occasionally slept for 20 hours a day. Mike, her husband, was concerned. Shelley maintained her composure in public, although she was collapsing inside. Next, and the concealed problem blew up in early 1999. Unexpectedly, Shell suffered at home, a severe bleeding of the esophagus, blood. Her throat's vessels exploded. She was taken to Cedars-Sinai in a hurry. Physicians said, "She is the worst. She had a deteriorating liver. Drugs were no longer effective. She might be saved by transplant." April, she was put on the transplant. In 1999, list. Her life for the following 22 months was a game of waiting. Each day was not sure. Each time her pager went off, she hoped. However, it was frequently error. She was shattered by every false alarm. She became weaker. She waited nonetheless. The call came in October, shortly after midnight 2000. After 22 long, grueling months while waiting for a transplant, Shelley, when Faber finally heard what she had to say, been anticipating. "Your liver is with us." It on the phone was Dr. John Verling, for Shelley and her spouse, Mike, an actor. The moment didn't feel real, Farrell. They have experienced multiple false warnings prior to, during, and after the transplant. When the pager went off, it was discovered to be an incorrect number. Every time had been horrifying. According to Shelley, we feared that tension may kill us prior to receiving the transplant. When the actual call arrived, Shell was in poor condition. She was having trouble staying awake. Later, she added, "I wasn't in pain. However, I was simply exhausted. I would awaken. Try getting up to fetch some water if you're thirsty. I'm more exhausted than I realize. Thirsty. And return to your slumber." At that, she and Mike were aware of the gravity of the situation, had developed. Over 50% of the population liver transplant waiting never gets just in time. Her health issues had began many years ago, and not in Thea's anyone might have predicted. In 1994, Shelley fell through her house's floor while it was being built. She broke everything, the left side of her ribs. While regular testing following the mishap, something odd caught the attention of doctors. Her liver counts were extremely high. They couldn't give an explanation. For decades, she remained stable thanks to medication. Despite her, the numbers were still excessive. Next, in the beginning of 1999, she experienced a terrible bleeding in the esophagus. She was hurried to Cedars-Sinai Health Center. That was the pivotal moment. Physicians informed her that the liver failure caused the bleeding. Medication was no longer sufficient, and a second bleed can be lethal. She required a transplant in order to live. The procedure ultimately occurred in October 2000, preserved her life. However, the specifics of the procedure are private. The reason of her hepatic failure was subsequently discovered to be an autoimmune disease. Her recuperation wasn't simple. The body is not bouncy swift recovery from such a significant operation. She needed to regain her strength, cope with persistent exhaustion, and bear the burden of all the things she had experienced. What Mike helped her get through it. He was Shelley's lifeline. He was there for each visit to the doctor. "He was with me every step of the way," she claimed. The path. Some marriages end because pressure such as this. Theirs didn't. "I'd only grew more powerful," Shelley subsequently stated. "We grew closer. I'm not sure how I might have succeeded without him." The transfusion was something Shelley never forgot, was only made feasible by another family. Lost a loved one. At one point, she said, she never forgot that she was alive, on borrowed time. The burden had been vicious. 22 months of terror, hope, and uncertainty. However, she didn't discuss her donor in public, she said, frequently about her profound appreciation. Organ transplants have challenging feelings. Although you're still living, someone else isn't. She never forgot that fact. The mental toll was also high. Although Shelley avoided discussing PTSD in public, research indicates that 46% of liver patients undergoing transplants endure severe tension following surgery. As much as 45.8% experience depression. Many people experience anxiousness. That persists long after the actual scars recover. Shelley acknowledged the experience radically altered her. Even despite this, life has somewhat returned. Typically, she stated, I'm different, individual. What matters to me and my perspective life, everything has changed. By 2003, 3 years following her transplant, she experienced became farther away, yet the recollections and feelings remained. I'm thankful for my existence, thankful for my physicians, appreciative of what I've discovered, I said, she said, but above everything, I'm appreciative for my spouse. However, in spite of all she discovered strength and growth, Shelley, was truthful about the price. I hope everyone has this experience. Shelley Fabares wasn't an activist at first. She was a well-known actress who was recognized for her work in films and television. However, everything changed when her family was affected by Alzheimer's. Elsa, her mother, received a diagnosis in the early 1980s. Shelley was unaware of it at first, but her mom had previously spent years of silently supporting Alzheimer's investigation. She even informed Shell's sister that should she ever contract the illness, she would choose to end her own life. However, by when medical professionals first diagnosed her, it was too late. She couldn't recall what she had stated. Elsa fought Alzheimer's disease for 9 long years. She died in 1992, away. Shelley was devastated by the loss, yet she didn't turn away. Instead, she turned her turning suffering into a goal. Given that in 1988, prior to her mother's passing, she'd already begun to volunteer for the Alzheimer's Association. She remained devoted. She joined them as one of their national representatives. This wasn't merely about consciousness. Change was what Shelley desired. Additionally, she continued beyond talks or charitable gatherings. She immediately went to Washington. From 1998 to 2004, she provided 4 congressional testimonies. She talked about the suffering, the necessity of assistance, and the significance of financing investigation. She didn't mince words. Her words had an effect. When a Senate at the 2001 hearing, Senator Tom Harkin cited her prior statements as a pivotal moment. It is demonstrated by the numbers. The NIH's Alzheimer's research budget increased to $520 million from $38 million in 1996, million in 2001. Shelley continued to struggle. She didn't use her popularity for its own sake, but to strive for greater things. I love being an actress, but, she has said, with the Alzheimer's work I'm doing, I believe that this is who I should be. What are you doing on this planet? She meant it. What began as a family tragedy turned into her purpose in life.